Good evening and welcome to Tuesday's Encounters in New York. This program is presented every Tuesday at 7 p.m. New York time. My name is Mark Beach and I'll be your host tonight. Our special guest tonight, joining us from Hawaii, is Tanya Penny. Tanya is an author of Connect with the Divine You. Tanya is a professional illness and trauma guide working from Hawaii. Tonight's discussion will be healing trauma and your soul's purpose. So welcome, Tanya, and we're excited to speak to you.
Hello, Mark. Hello,
Hi.
everybody. Nice to
How are
be
you?
here with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Very good, thank you. So would you like to just jump into the discussion of your program of healing trauma?
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to start by giving people a little bit of background, like, why is this lady talking about this? Who is she? So I always love to give people a little bit of background, if that's okay, Mark.
Fine.
Yeah. So I got into this work initially because I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and that was back in 2004. At that time, I was an occupational therapist, and my love has always been mental health focus. But at that time in my life, I was actually working with people who had multiple sclerosis at a rehab hospital. And then I was diagnosed, and it was shocking to say the least. And the first couple of years, I took I would say solely the Western medicine approach because that was really all I knew at the time. And for the next 3 years, I continued to get worse. And so, those of you that are new to multiple sclerosis, people can have a lot of different symptoms, even though it's the same illness. And for me, I had lost vision in my right eye. I had trouble finding words and speaking. I then had like a stroke on the right side of my body, is what it presented like. So, numbness and weakness in my arm and my leg and that side of the body. And then for about, as I said, about 3 years, I continued to get worse. And I was giving myself a shot of Western medicine at the time. And this was in September 2007. I remember it very well. And I heard this voice. And the voice said, put down this Western medicine and I'm going to show you how to heal it, like another way. And I don't know why I listened. At the time, I was not religious, I was not spiritual, but I did. I did. I listened, and for the next couple of years, I followed my guidance or the guidance I was receiving, and had to make all sorts of changes in my life. And we're going to be talking about some of those today. But the really big thing that I saw, Mark, that was at the core was that I had a lot of trauma, that unresolved trauma that I had not even, I'm not going to say I hadn't been aware of a little bit, but not fully aware of, and how much it was impacting me. And really how much when we have these unresolved traumas, even if we don't remember what they are, which I can talk a little bit about that as well for myself, that they are still living in our body and creating illness and negative symptoms. And they're still running us every day. These unresolved traumas, whether it's from the limiting belief systems and fears that were created by the trauma, typically they're still running us. And there's a couple of unhealthy patterns that I address pretty much with everyone I work with, and I had to address them big time for myself. And I call them the 3 Ps. And that is perfection, people pleasing, and pretending to be superhuman. Those are the 3 biggies. I don't know, Mark, most people I work with have all of them, but for yourself, what do you think?
Well, yeah, in our professional career, I'm sure we all do that. We bend to the
Oh,
will
yeah.
of our masters, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In work. And then, a lot of people find that they're also doing it a lot in their personal relationships, and they don't even realize because they've become survival mechanisms due to the past traumas, the past wounds, and negative experiences we have. they pretty much just they get synced into place, and we don't even realize we're doing it. Right? We don't even realize we're falling into whether it's the inner critic, the perfectionist, the pleaser, or the superhuman part of us, and because of those traumas. And it's really important, though, that we to heal, right, to fully heal, that we are looking at these patterns, which again I can get more into later. But fast forward, so those are all the things that I was looking at and working with. And then in November 2010, I received an MRI that was clear. And originally I had 80 lesions in the brain, in my brain. And through the work that I did and continue to do, they were gone and the symptoms were gone. And I was a Western medicine miracle, because they say even to this day that MS isn't healable.
Right.
So that's what's brought me to this speaking here today with you guys. Is I've been doing this work since 2010 with others, and solely virtually starting in 2013, way before the pandemic hit.
Right.
I'm a gypsy and was kind of like wanting to travel around and find my new home. I was living in Idaho at the time, and yeah, so took it on the road, took it virtual, and I'm glad I did, because I get to work with people all over,
Right.
which is pretty
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and these revelations of people such as yourself are becoming more and more commonplace. We're hearing much more about it, and just in the general population, in the general thing. So it's very good to talk to somebody about, a personal experience and how they achieved this. Now, when you say you're a medical miracle, uh, did any of these MDs try to follow up as to what path you took to cure yourself? And they just
Well, my neurologist, and she was a great neurologist, actually. The first neurologist I had, I fired because he told me on my first session with him that I was going to end up in a wheelchair. And part of me was like, that's not happening. And, delete. And I need to find somebody else who's a little more positive in their approach. But yeah, my last neurologist, again, I haven't needed a neurologist since 2010. But she was curious, she's like, whatever you're doing, keep it up.
right,
And, and what are some of the things you're doing? And I, told her that I was doing a lot of course, the normal stuff like looking at your diet and exercise and things like that, but that a big piece of it was emotional healing, and healing traumas and those limiting beliefs and fears that have been driving me to to do unhealthy patterns that made me sick, or I believe were at the core of making me sick due to the unresolved traumas. So yeah, that's a great question.
yeah,
And she, once in a while, I'll still get a client from her, actually. It's been a while now, but at first I did get more of that, more of those from her. But it's been a long time. God, 20 years. I can't believe that. Um, yeah, Mark, long
yeah.
time. But yeah. Any questions before I dive into the topic? Love
Um,
questions.
well, now we'll let you, give us your thoughts on this, and then probably develop more questions from that.
Yeah, great. I know that I picked today's topic. It's kind of a broad one, healing trauma and your soul's purpose. So one of the pieces of the work that I had to do for myself, and that I do with others, is really looking at both what I call the human perspective and the spiritual perspective when it comes to healing, um, and specifically healing trauma, which, most people either come through the trauma door or the illness door to work with me. Um, so either one, right? Because trauma, unresolved trauma, I believe, is what creates illness in our bodies. So I think that, yeah, both what I call the human perspective, and then working with our spiritual self as well. I believe both of those are absolutely needed. I will say too, and we'll go more into those, but I want to just say as kind of a side note that possibly you've heard of spiritual bypassing. Have you heard of that, Mark?
No, not in particularly in that way.
Yeah. So we have to be careful, and this is where the working with our human part comes in. We have to be careful that we don't do the spiritual bypassing. So a lot of my clients come through the door and they are quite spiritual. And what I find that they do, and I used to do this too, is that we are coming from that higher level perspective and we are forgetting about that wounded part of us that needs to still be tended to, heard, the emotions still need to be felt. So that's what is termed spiritual bypassing, where we're just like, oh, but yes, my mom and dad, they were doing the best that they could. And that is absolutely true.
Right. Oh,
And
yeah.
we need that perspective, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we also need to be tending to that human wounded part of us. And I think that's the part that most of us struggle with. I'm going to say some, people struggle with the spiritual part too, but I want to talk about both of those parts a little more depth today and
Okay.
hopefully shine the light on a new perspective for some people. I'm actually going to start with what I call the easy part, the spiritual part. And a lot of people here perhaps are very spiritual, into spirituality. And I just want to say too that when I say spirituality, I come from the perspective that it doesn't matter what religion you are, if you are a religion. I believe all religions are spiritual, but if you are spiritual, you don't necessarily have to be connected to a religion. So I just always want to start off by saying that I have clients from all different walks of life when it comes to spirituality and religion. But the core that we want to really, I guess the word would be embody, is that we are all powerful souls. And we all, I believe, came here with a purpose. And that part of that purpose was that we did choose to have these traumas, wounds, negative experiences, whatever you want to call them. We did choose to have them, and for various reasons. So I always like to say to people, you may have been victimized, but you are not a victim. Right? Because if you're coming from that soul perspective that you've chosen everything, then there is no need to feel like the victim anymore. And I think that's a really powerful part to healing it, but that's not the only part. And I know some people have a lot of trouble with, I don't know if part of you, Mark, was like, what? Right? Like, why? Like, I'll just give an example for myself. Like, why would I have chosen to have parents that would be so abusive? Right. So I didn't share a lot about my history, but just kind of, I guess the fast version is, I grew up in a household, parents that were very young. I was an oops. And I think my dad was 18 and my mom was 17 when it happened. So that in itself, a little bit of a trauma for all of us. And parents that were, I'm going to say yes, immature, for being so young, but then also just having their own unresolved traumas that they then passed on to me.
Right.
So I had a lot of verbal, physical, and sexual abuse, and that kind of set the stage, right? So people might ask, well, why would your soul have chosen that? And that is a great question. So again, it's not going to be the same for everybody, but I know for myself and for a lot of the people that I work with that we chose these pretty severe traumas in order to overcome them and then to be able to help others to do the same. And I kind of feel the same about illness, right? My soul did choose to have an illness to overcome it so that I could help other people to do the same. So I think that's one of the big reasons why our soul chooses some of these, maybe pretty severe for some of you listening, and maybe a little bit lighter for some of you. It's different for everybody. But I think that acknowledgement that we're powerful souls and co-creators of our life is really needed to heal, whether it's illness or trauma.
Yeah, a lot of us are like searching for answers or, things to relieve some of our symptoms or, as you say, traumas that we may or may not be able to specify. But
Yeah. And I'm going to say, like, when you're in the middle of it, Mark,
mm,
like when I was in the middle of the MS, I was not like, yay, my soul chose this
right,
to overcome. Like I wasn't in that place at that time. And I definitely wasn't in that place to think, oh yeah, like I asked for this so I could help others. That usually comes a little later.
right,
But
okay,
but but I think knowing that there is a purpose, even though you don't know it right now what it is important. I think it provides you some of that strength that's going to pull you forward and give you that hope and that courage to do the deeper work that is often required. Um, yeah, and the other spiritual piece too that I just want to briefly touch on is that not only are we powerful souls, but we all have a huge divine team. And I'd like to talk about our divine team in two parts. The seen,
okay.
those who are physically on the planet. So people like you who are here hosting this,
Mhm.
people like myself. So we've got these people that are physically on the planet supporting us, maybe a loved one, maybe a coach, a healer, a teacher, a doctor, friends, fill in the blank. And then we also have what I call our unseen team. And people might call, God, universe, source,
Mhm.
angels, spirit guides, fill in the blank. So I think that's a really important piece to remind ourselves as well. We're not doing this alone. And I think one of the most common misconceptions that I just want to touch on too, Mark, is that a lot of people have this limiting belief that when you get an illness or if you have been treated, poorly, if you have this past trauma, whatever it is, that somebody upstairs is doing this to punish you and or it's like karma.
Right.
So I don't know if you've heard those before or even
Yeah,
thought
I mean
about.
that's definitely let's say the Christian right that we're hearing so much about now these days.
Yeah.
Very conservative and very attached just to the verses of the Bible, and
Yeah, and
how
like this punishing God that's up there, like I must have did something wrong and I'm being punished. And so we could just invite everyone to throw that out because your divine team, again, if your soul chose to have certain experiences, they're not going to interfere, but they are going to help you through it.
okay.
Um, and it's going to look different for different people. I recently, for about the last year or so, I've been doing, I don't know if you've heard of ketamine assisted therapy.
Oh, ketamine. Okay.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. To
I, I
hear.
I don't understand what it is, but I have heard of it. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't give you the big details. All I can say is that it's actually approved now by the government, FDA approved for healing depression and anxiety and PTSD. And so as something else I wanted to pursue to help still heal deeper layers, I was doing that for about the last year. I've been doing that with my counselor. And one of the great things that happened during it, and everyone's experience can be different. So I don't want to, yeah, I just want everyone to know that if you do ketamine assisted therapy, it can be different for everybody.
Okay.
Um, for me, it helped to bring up unresolved traumas that I had repressed, that I knew I still had because there were still things happening in my life that I just kind of knew there was still more unresolved trauma. But if you don't have the memory, it's really hard to heal it. So
Right.
it helped me to bring up the memories so that I could heal those on a deeper level. But the other thing it helped me do is to connect more deeply with what I call my unseen team. And part of my team is Jesus. And it was interesting during this ketamine session, I said to Jesus, I said, you know, where were you when I was being abused? Right? Like
Right.
you
Right.
weren't there. Like, where were you? And the answer was, I was with you all the time. Like you wouldn't have survived the abuse that you did and be
Right.
where you are today if I wasn't supporting you and if your whole team wasn't supporting you. And I was like, oh, interesting. Okay.
Right.
So yeah,
That's uh,
yeah.
that's like the footsteps on the beach
Yes.
scenario where when they
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, afterwards I was like, oh my God, that is that poem. Like, how
right.
crazy is that? So
Yeah.
yeah, that was an interesting experience. So yeah, there's nobody punishing you, and your divine team, unseen team, at least, is always offering you love and guidance and support, but they're never going to get in the way of the experience that your soul asked for, right? They're never gonna stop that experience because it's what you asked for. So they're not controlling anything. They're just here to support you. So I wanted to share that.
Okay. Um,
Um, yeah. Any questions on that piece, Mark?
um, well, that's also a fairly common thing. We've recently had a number of guests that were from Dolores Cannon School of Quantum Healing.
I've heard of
Um,
that. Yes.
and yeah, I think just Dolores Cannon has a huge amount of videos out there, explaining her views on these things. And it's very intriguing.
Yeah.
And mostly, mostly what this was past life regression and looking, for trauma. And it's also about your divine team.
Yeah.
That's what the discussion is. And they get to this through hypnosis.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
basically, that's one session for them, which lasts anywhere from like 4 to 6 hours. They
I've had one.
record. Okay,
Yeah.
they record the audio for you to go back and review. And a lot of those themes struck me as you were speaking.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and I was wondering if you give specific techniques to your clients, because it was struck me as some of the things that we've done through here through Ernie's training, EFT, uh,
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Absolutely. I do have a set of, I call them tools, a set of tools that I've
right,
created that yes, and I'm going to take you guys through one in a little bit.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah,
and and
yeah.
and and since you're in Hawaii, and I'm going to murder this name, Ho'oponopono. Have you ever heard of that? Yeah,
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah. The
Um,
prayer. Yeah,
the
absolutely.
prayer, and we go through these things often, as far as training and everything, but a lot of times they don't stick with us. We do it maybe for a few weeks, a few days or something, but then it sort of fades into the background again. Um, and is that part of your training for clients that they have something more substantial to
Oh,
continue
yes.
with? Yeah. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, most of my clients um are with me for 5 to 10 years.
okay.
And one of the reasons that is because it does take time to heal trauma. It's not, especially some of these more severe ones. Um, but also because I believe we need support. And that's what you're talking about, right? Whether it's support in terms of accountability and support in terms of tools. And so, yeah, I have a tool bag. So when people come to work with me, it's a year-long program. I have a 6-month and a year-long program, and they typically, as part of that, you receive a tool bag, right? You receive a set of tools, guided meditation practices that I create, self-healing processes, which I'm going to take you, all of you through in a little bit.
Okay.
What I call truth loops. So yeah, lots of different tools that help you to discover and reprogram those limiting beliefs and fears that you picked up, whether it was from the actual trauma or just from culture, family, uh, what we call the collective consciousness. But I think that is a really big part, as well as tools that are going to help you do, which is the next piece I'm going to talk about. And that is working with that human part of us, our wounded younger parts. Some people call it your inner child. But I believe that it's really important, and it's one of our soul's purpose is to learn to be what I call that unconditionally loving divine parent to yourself and to all of your younger parts. Some people call it self-love. So I call it a little bit different than that. It is an act of self-love, but yeah, it's learning to be that divine parent to ourselves that most of us didn't have growing up. And again, even though our parents did their best,
Right.
we didn't have that experience. So it's something that we need to learn and practice, and it takes time. And it takes time, and it takes support and tools to do that. And for most people, I'm typically the role model of that. So most people that I work with have a hard time trusting people because of the way they were treated, typically growing up by mom and dad and siblings. And not that those are the only traumas, but I would say that's a big one for a lot of the people I work with: family trauma, family wounds. So yeah, absolutely. I think that ongoing support, not that just having a session once in a while isn't helpful with, like, I'll just say some that I've used, like having an Akashic record session, having a gene key session, having the what you call the Dolores Cannon, I forget what it's called, but that
The
QHHT, I think.
hypnosis, the quantum
Yeah.
hypnosis.
Yep. So I think it is helpful to have a single session, but I think it's even, I'm not going to say more important, but as important at least, to find someone that you are going to continuously work with, not just a one-time thing.
Right.
Again, not that those can't be helpful. I think they are, and I still utilize those. But to work with someone on an ongoing basis that will help you, will give you the tools, will give you the support, and really build that trust. I think that's what's really needed to fully heal trauma. Absolutely. That's a great question. So I still use my own tools every day.
Right.
Not that I don't fall off the wagon. We all do.
Right.
I just got back from a 10-day vacation, and during that vacation, did I use my guided meditation practice every day? No, I did not.
Okay.
No, I did not. But I did get back on the wagon once I got home.
Yeah. So,
So yeah, great question.
just off the top, and since you were talking about that and support systems thing, are you raising a family of your own?
I chose not to have children,
Okay.
actually.
All right.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I joke that at the age of 19, I, for 3 days, thought about having children,
Mhm.
and then it was gone.
Yeah.
And then it was gone. And I think it's because, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mark.
No. Well, I've done the same thing. Whether it was a conscious choice or not, I chose not to have children also. So,
And I'm finding that not all of my clients, I still have plenty of clients that are parents, but I have a lot of clients, at least 50%, that do not have children. And whether it was because they couldn't, or they chose not to, or they just didn't meet the partner. But what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of us that are here on the planet that were meant to not have children for two reasons. And one is that we would have likely carried on the unresolved trauma because we wouldn't have given ourselves the time to heal it. So I think that's one of the reasons. And I think a second reason is that, again, for myself, I'm actually here to work with a lot of people on the planet to help them heal their trauma. And I don't know if I could as powerfully do it, Mark, if I had children. I don't think I could give as much as I give, and still have, for both people, right? For both kids and then clients. Like, I don't know if I'd have that bandwidth. And to continue to heal my own stuff, right? I don't
yeah.
I don't pretend to have it all done. I don't know if it's going to ever all be done.
Right.
That's a
Eventually,
question I get a lot. Yeah. Once I leave the planet.
Right.
But that has me thinking about something else I want to add in, is that this lifetime. Like so many of us have chosen some really big stuff to walk through. And I believe that's for a big reason. This is the first lifetime that we actually have the capability to fully heal, not just the stuff from this life, but from all of our past lives, which you brought up earlier.
Yeah.
So I believe that that's possible in this lifetime, and that we are given that opportunity to do that. So that's where I feel like the past life stuff comes in. You know, people ask me, so does the work you do help heal past life traumas? Absolutely. Absolutely, they do. Um, and you know, the guides are saying too that oftentimes it might not look the same, but it will be a common thread or um, wound. So let's just say if you're having money issues in this lifetime, you probably had a money issue in a previous life. I had sexual abuse in this lifetime. It happened in a past life. So it's like everything we're experiencing in this life is actually helping us, giving us the opportunity to heal the past lives as well, which is pretty cool.
Good. Yeah, because as you said, I don't have a family, so but even now I have a brother and sisters with children, and I don't know how much I optimistic I am for the future. And sometimes I feel a little afraid for these kids. So the future's not that bright as far
Well,
as culturally.
yeah. And again, this comes back to the work we're all here to do. And all of these children that are coming in, just like us, have chosen to come in during this time.
Mm.
And they, and chosen all the experiences, whether it's the parents, whether it's the, traumas at school, whatever they experience. It's to remember that they chose to come in during this time as well on the planet. And because of that, they're going to be equipped with the tools and the support, and hopefully help us to shift it in a positive way as well. But yeah, I think there's lots of hope. We just have to remember we have to remember all of this, right? Which we all forget once we come in. This is part of the
Right.
journey, right?
Right.
Like most people don't remember when they come in, oh yeah, I'm this powerful soul. Like we have to go through all of these, I don't want to call them trials and tribulations, but those are the words that are coming in for me right now.
Yeah.
And my life looks very different now than it did, 20 years ago, right? When I was in the middle of MS, I was in a abusive relationship marriage. My life is completely different now. But if I hadn't have done this deeper work, I don't think I know I wouldn't be where I am right now. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean that's always the biggest question: is why do these things happen, right?
Yeah. So I
And
encourage everyone to ask why from a place of power versus a why me, like a
right.
victim energy, right? Like, oh, I wonder why this is happening. I wonder why my soul chose this really shitty,
Yeah.
challenging experience. So
And
yeah.
you can scold your soul, yeah.
Oh my God. I have so many clients that when they first come to work with me and they're learning all of this, especially the spiritual piece, they'll be like, I'm so mad at my soul.
Yeah.
I hate my soul. I'm like, well, you can do that all you want, but I wouldn't stay there too long. That's just going to keep you stuck.
So the soul is probably more powerful than you are.
Yeah, our soul doesn't get upset about that. About our human ego. Yeah, it doesn't get upset. It's like, okay, you can do that. It's not gonna help, but if you need to stay there for a while, you can do that. And so yeah, I support people through that. Absolutely.
Okay.
And here's the thing too, Mark, when you've asked about family, um, raising my own family, again, I haven't really had that question before. And now I'm thinking like, oh, I wonder why that question came in. And I know why. It's actually moving into the next piece I want to talk about, which is learning to be that unconditionally loving divine parent to ourselves. So I think a lot of people are so good at doing that for other people. And a lot of us had to do that. I just did a podcast recently on, I don't know if you've heard of it, Mark, but it's called parentification.
No, I haven't heard of that.
It's when you, as a child, were put into an adult role, whether it was emotionally taking care of a parent, physically, parents or siblings, financially. It's kind of a new thing out there, but yeah, parentification wound. So I think a lot of us from a very young age learned to take care of others and didn't learn how to take care of ourselves. We put all the focus on giving to other people. And so I believe that's, one of the reasons why many of us aren't having children now is because we are actually learning to be that divine parent, what I call that divine parent to ourselves. And that takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of practice. I have found I'm still working on it. Right. And then we go back to the 3 Ps that we talked about, Mark, right? Not falling into people pleasing, not falling into superhuman, where like I have to take care of everybody else and put myself last, or that perfectionist who kicks our butt, right? The inner critic who is so not nice to us and beats up on ourselves, right? Those are the 3 patterns that we really need to shift so we can be that unconditionally loving parent to ourselves and to all of our younger wounded parts. Yeah, so I think that was why you asked me about the family question. So
Well, yeah,
thank you for
and
that.
whether you're going to get into this in the future, to make these changes, you have to consciously push some things away, change things or remove
Yeah,
yourself from situations.
yeah. Part of being that unconditionally loving parent, from my experience, means that you really do need to look at, I call them the 10, 8, 10, depending on in which way I'm talking about them, like all of the life areas, right? All of your life areas. And so, like I did with the MS too, to heal the MS, it was looking at, for example, you know, are the relationships that I'm in, and I'll just talk about personally first, right? Partnership, friendship, family ships, all those types of personal relationships, are they loving and supportive? And if they're not, and I found when I first looked at this, they were not, right? I had to leave my marriage.
Right.
It was not, it's not a healthy, not a healthy marriage, very controlling, verbally abusive, sometimes into the physical once in a while. And so, part of being that divine parent for ourselves is setting boundaries with people. And that can look like saying, you know what, it's not okay if you treat me this way. And if you continue to treat me this way, I'm going to, I'm going to leave, right? In terms of a marriage. But that can be true for friendships. Um, I just realized just this past year that I was in a friendship that was very much like the relationship I had with my mother. And I couldn't believe it. Like it was more subtle. My mom was like extremely Jekyll and Hyde. It was very, I'm going to say blatant, like in your face. This was a more subtle, like poking at you, criticizing, putting you down. And I finally realized it. I was like, oh my God, I don't feel good when I get off the phone with this person. So for me to be that divine, loving parent to myself, I had to end the friendship. So yeah, I would say oftentimes when we are healing illness and we are healing the past trauma, it's going to require us to clear out sometimes relationships, sometimes it's a job, right? I realized that, oh my gosh, I was, when I was back in OT land at this huge rehab hospital, I realized that part of me being my divine parent to myself is, you know what, I need to leave this job, for a couple of different reasons. One of them was the environment wasn't healthy for me. Probably like a lot of people listening to this, I'm very empathic and highly sensitive. and intuitive. And so I can really easily pick up on other people's stuff. And so here I was at this huge 300 plus bed rehab hospital, you know, with all these people that were suffering. And at that point, I hadn't learned how to not take on other people's stuff or how to clear it out. Right. I didn't even know about it. I didn't know I was intuitive and empathic. And I mean, we're all intuitive, but yeah, some of us are more highly sensitive than others. And so, you know, for me, it was needing to leave for that reason, but not realizing what it was until later on. I just knew that environment wasn't good for me. People, chemicals, all of it, right? All of it. So yeah, that's a great question. It does require, again, I don't want to say the word require, but we will often be guided to, you know, in order to heal that trauma, to heal that illness, that we are going to have to need to make some really big life changes. And it can be scary, which goes back to the support, right? Having that support from somebody else. You know, a lot of my clients do find that they need to change locations. They do need to set some boundaries with people in their lives, relationships, work boundaries as well, right?
Right.
Would say one of the biggest things, especially in the US culture, but I know it's in other cultures too, is that work equals worth. And so that like workaholism and overworking is definitely one of those superhuman traits that a lot of my clients have to shift. Absolutely. Well, and not just my clients, everyone on the planet really needs to look at that.
Right. And then the idea just came to my mind about currently a lot of the millennials and the Gen Zs or whatever, the Gen Xs or whatever the generations are declining that to say, I'm not going to work extraordinary amount of time, or, my value, my worth is not settled in this job. And it's really in regard to companies recruiting people and things, it's making it much more difficult for them because the workforce hasn't bought into the same goals. So.
No, and that's one of the things that we're being guided to really shift in a big way. And I would say, not that it hasn't been happening in the previous years, but it feels like this year moving forward. Actually, yeah, they're saying this year moving forward in a really bigger way is that whole paradigm. And I'm going to call it more of the masculine paradigm, the do, work.
Right.
That is really shifting, and it's shifting big time in this year and moving forward. And yeah, it's already been shifting with, like you said, the rainbow children, the millennials, all the different,
right.
new species of human that are coming in. If I don't know what else to call it, but I'm going to say it's a new species of human.
Yeah,
upgraded humans that are not going to be putting up with that anymore. They're saying, no, this is not that balance of divine masculine and feminine that we are here to have. Like working 80-hour work weeks, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like that's not sustainable. And hello, what do you think's at the bottom of, again, most illnesses is overworking, that superhuman piece. So yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. I think that's really important and a huge shift.
And just thinking about it at this point, the generations have actually become compressed in time. Generations in the 1960s or 80s were 20 years. But now these generation groups are now 8 to 10 years, and they're probably going to get more compressed as we go along.
I think so. It's feeling more like 5 years and maybe even less and less moving forward. But yeah, I mean, these old paradigms are being called to crumble. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy and it's going to be fast, but it's happening. I know that when I with the MS and a lot of clients that I work with that have a chronic illness, that they come in the door to heal, that one of the things we really have to work on is, you know what, you're not meant to work 40-hour plus work weeks. Like I'm not, right? Not saying that I don't ever work 40 hours. Sometimes I do, but it's my choice. And it's a conscious choice to do that. And, I believe different types of work do require different, I'm going to call it work schedules or hours worked. So like I see 3 clients in a day, 4 at the max.
Mhm.
So that's 3 to 4 hours a day. And it's because of the deep work we're doing. I can't, I can't be the machine and pop out 6 to 8 clients in a day like I used to in the OT clinic, because it's much different work that I'm doing. Right? It's very deep emotional work, deep healing work. And so that I stay healthy and the MS doesn't come knocking on my door again, I have to have different work schedules and different hours and boundaries around my time. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
That may be true for some of you listening as well. And it can be really hard though to make that decision and to go down that path, because we're so conditioned to work 40 plus hours, and like there's something wrong with us if we can't, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I did that for many, many years. So
Yeah, I don't think I asked you what did you do? I'm curious.
I was I had a degree in biology, and I worked in a medical chemistry lab for like
Wow.
40 years, and then telecommunications and things beyond that. But it was all corporate, corporate
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
production, corporate things.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So what they're saying too is that, and this year is going to be bigger, but it actually started with COVID.
Okay.
That whole shift paradigm of what work schedule looks like, and you have to be at the job versus virtual, just all of that. And I would say this year, with more AI and other more technological things that are happening, that a lot of people are going to be moving out of the quote unquote typical work type job and into more of this type of, if you want to call it healing, light worker,
Mm.
yeah, that kind of work, ethereal, spiritual.
Right.
So it feels like more people are moving into that direction, and it's interesting because I was just talking to someone else about this, that a lot of my clients, after they've done a certain amount of healing of the trauma, after they've healed a majority of the illness, that they are then shifting into doing more healing, coaching, guiding work, and helping others to do that as well, where they've been, like yourself and like
Yeah.
myself, and or like doctors, nurses, engineers, more of the, teachers, more of the typical, um, I'm going to call it the previously typical professions, I think is shifting
Yeah.
big time.
Um,
Absolutely.
okay. Have we shifted off track far enough? Then
No, I think it's all on track.
okay.
It's all, I mean, everything we're talking about here is really about, number one, getting in touch with the truth that you are a powerful soul, right?
Right.
And that you have a huge divine team, and that it's part of your soul's purpose to have these traumas, these illnesses, which having an illness is a trauma. When I got the diagnosis of MS, that was very traumatic for me. So I think,
Oh, I'm sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
just want to throw that out there as well, whatever the illness is. Um, and then that's part of it. And then coming back again to being this unconditionally loving divine parent to yourself, and self-acceptance, self-love. And a big piece of that is, and I know I said I was going to take people into a little process, and I'm still wondering if that is the best way to do this today, or if perhaps what I'm feeling guided to do is actually talk a little bit about it, but then send people, if they're interested, um, to a link where they can actually listen to me guiding them through, because I think it'll serve you guys more to do
Okay.
that than
Yeah.
it would, knowing I've got about 10 minutes or so left, because of my schedule today. But yeah, it feels like that probably would be better. And I'll talk a
Okay.
little bit about it, but then they
Yeah.
will get to actually experience it. So I don't know if that's something you want me to drop in the chat, or I
Um,
think I did give you the link in the document I filled out for you guys. But
okay,
but even if you go to my website, it's tanyapenny.com, and up at the top, it'll say, get your free Evolve blueprint. And so if you sign up for that there, it will include this self-healing process recording that you'll get to listen to, as well as a guided meditation and some of my other tools and videos for you to get started with. So just wanted everyone to know that. But yeah, I'd like to spend, if you're okay, if you don't have any other questions, Mark, just a little more time about the divine parent, and specifically about soothing our traumatized, wounded parts. If you're okay with that, unless you have
yeah,
another question.
that's fine. I mean, um, that's what I was saying before. I don't want to get off track. I mean, there were so many interesting things we can talk about, but the ideas that you had to present tonight, if we could just keep forging ahead with that.
Yeah, let's head back in that particular direction. So one of the ways that I teach people to be that unconditionally loving parent to themselves is going through a process, which you guys can all experience, as I said, how to do that. But what it's doing is it's helping you to soothe that wounded part of you. So number one, acknowledge, we're talking about trauma here. So acknowledge whatever the trauma is. So many of us haven't fully acknowledged these past traumas and wounds, whatever you want to call them, negative experiences. And I think that happens for a couple of reasons. One is that our parents weren't, or other adults that were helping us weren't capable of doing that. And a lot of them were actually part of the trauma, part of the cause of the trauma. So they definitely were not going to acknowledge it. Like my parents to this day don't acknowledge the abuse that happened at their hands, at their mouth and their hands. They still deny it. And so I think that's one of the reasons why this is so important, that we do this for ourselves, is to acknowledge these past negative experiences, traumas, wounds. Finally, for those younger parts of us, like what actually happened. And
Right.
so one of the ways we do that, or I recommend we do that, is not just saying it out loud, but writing it down. Like actually writing down, at this age, this is what happened to this part of me. In as much or as little detail as you feel guided to. But I think that's a really important piece of being that divine parent to ourselves. So number one, acknowledgement. And then number two, usually when that acknowledgement happens, Mark, and you guys are welcome to do it right now. Like if you want to write down one of your past traumas, if you have a notebook, or if you don't have a notebook or journal, if you just want to acknowledge it to yourself as you're listening, like, yeah, this particular thing, negative experience, trauma, wound, happened to me at this age or between these ages. So my example would be from the age of 6 to 10, my 6-year-old up to my 10-year-old experienced sexual abuse by my father, right? So I'm going to acknowledge that. And I don't have to write down all the details, or sometimes I might. Again, it's whatever you're guided to do. Typically, when we do that, there's going to be an emotion that happens, an emotion that arises. Not always, but typically, especially if you're fairly new to doing this type of work and you're not spiritually bypassing, there's going to be an emotion. So even as I just said that, even though I've worked with this a lot, I could feel that there was some sadness and fear come up. So emotions of sadness and fear around that happening to those parts of me. So then the next piece would be to just acknowledge, okay, what are these emotions? So we acknowledge what happened. Then we acknowledge the emotions that are coming up. And oftentimes these emotions are coming up for the first time because we have stuffed them, because we didn't know what to do with them. If we don't know what to do with something, we stuff it, right? If we don't have the tools, we don't have the support. And that's why we stuffed it as children,
Right.
most of the time. So we acknowledge the emotions that are coming up, and we even write those down. And then one thing that we go a step further is notice where you feel those emotions in your body. I felt mine in my I'm going to call it between my second and third chakra, kind of above my belly button, but below my lungs. And I felt that there. So I would recommend and invite you to put a hand on your body where you feel that emotion or those emotions. And if you can't comfortably do so, then you're going to just bring your attention to that area of your body. And again, just acknowledging this is where this trauma lives in my body and these emotions that are attached to this trauma. And then you breathe and you feel. And that can take as little or as long as you want to. And again, when I take people through the actual audio self-healing process of this that I'm talking through right now, I'll say pause if you need to, right? And stay and feel it as long as you need to. And this isn't a one and done type of thing. I think a lot of us learned that as kids too, growing up. Oh, you should be over that by now.
Right.
Right? You should be over that by now. You felt it, now get over it. When it's like this huge thing. Or even if
Yeah.
it wasn't a huge thing, even if it was like to somebody else, maybe it was a small thing, but that doesn't mean it was small to you and those younger parts of you. So putting a hand on the body, feeling the emotion, the sensation in the body, breathing. And then as the divine parent, also telling this younger part of you, and again, in my example, my 6 to 10-year-old, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. Right? I'm so sorry that this happened to you. And I know it was awful. And I'm here for you now. Right? I'm here to help you through this now. I think is a really powerful thing to do with these younger parts, these inner children that we're working with in order to heal the trauma and to be that divine parent, which is part of the healing. Then we move into asking that part of you. And again, my 6 to 10-year-old is the example. Given this experience, given this trauma, what limiting belief or fear did you take on about yourself or the world, given that you had this experience? And I would say for most people, whatever the trauma is, the most common belief we take on, especially if it happened as a child, is that it happened because I'm not lovable, worthy, or good enough. Because I'm broken, because there's something wrong with me. Or because it happened, I'm broken and there's something wrong with me. Right? So that was one I had to work with for a very long time and still do need to work with sometimes. If I'm triggered, if I'm ever doing something new, perhaps like every time I come to do an interview, even though I've done thousands of these, there's still that part of me that says, oh, you're not going to do it good enough. You're not good enough. Right? So I have to work with that part of me. This isn't like a one and done thing. We're going to be working with these parts of ourselves our whole life. So yeah, asking what they believe. What is that fear or that limiting belief? Another one that I feel like is important to bring up for myself, given that experience for myself, is that I can't trust people. So a lot of our traumas do involve other people. And because of that, we often are subconsciously, right, not consciously, carrying around this belief, I can't trust people, right? Because they did this to me, whatever it was. So we want to ask those younger parts of us and really hear what they're saying and acknowledge again, okay, I understand why you might have picked up this belief or this fear. That makes sense given what you experienced as a child. And then part of that being a divine parent is not just acknowledging the limiting belief or fear, but then also deciding, okay, what does this younger part of me need to hear now? What's really the truth? So the truth might be, and again, what I've used for myself is just because you were abused doesn't mean you're not lovable, worthy, or good enough. Right? There was obviously something, wrong with those people. And yes, from a spiritual perspective, I did ask for it, but we're not going there right now. We're talking to your human part, and that part doesn't need or care about that. This part just wants to be heard. It wants help with emotions. It wants to be soothed. So soothing truths is the next piece of the self-healing divine parent process. And so again, letting them know it's not because you weren't worthy or lovable or good enough that this trauma happened, that you had this negative experience or treatment. And I know that you couldn't trust these people. So I'm going to acknowledge that next belief, right? I can't trust people. It's true that you couldn't trust those people, but there are people on the planet now you can trust. There are people out there you can trust. And as your divine parent, again, to my younger parts, I'm going to help you find those people. And if there's anyone in your life right now that is not trustworthy, we get to hit the delete button. We get to set a boundary. We get to walk away. Whereas a child, especially if your traumas were in childhood before the age of 18, most of us couldn't walk away. I couldn't go find a new mother and father. I couldn't, I'm just thinking about too, a lot of my traumas happened in the classroom. Like I couldn't go to another school. I mean, maybe some people could, but that wasn't a choice for me. That wasn't an option for me. Right. So it's reminding and I would say reminding ourselves now that we are adults and we don't have to stay in any situation that is not loving, not fulfilling, and even harming, right? Harmful for us. And that's part of that being that divine parent, is remembering that and acting from that place as well. Then what we do, Mark, is we ask them after we do these pieces, is there anything they want, need, or desire from us now? So again, I'd ask my 6 to 10-year-old, because it was about 4 years that she was sexually abused. I'd ask her, is there anything you need from me right now? Anything you want me to do, stop doing? Just anything at all that you want or need from me right now. And you can get lots of different answers, you guys. I mean, depending on what age this part of you is, this part of you might say, you know what, I really want to go take a nap. I'm tired. Or this part of you might say, you know what, I really want to go. Mine often says, I want to go in the water. She loves the water. She wants to go in the pool. She wants to go in the ocean. So a lot of, there could be lots of possibilities, but asking what they need and then letting them know when you're going to give them that, right? I can't always say yes right now. Like I can't go in the pool right now. We've got a client to see, but we will go at the end of today, right? After work. So you want to be, you want to be that divine parent that if you promise something, you actually want to follow through with it. Unlike most of us growing up, we had lots of fallen promises, right? From people that we were supposed to trust. And that's part of building that trust. And then we want to end this process by physically giving ourselves a hug, physically hugging that part of us. And if you can picture yourself eyes closed at that age, so picturing your 6 to 10-year-old for me, and I can picture myself at that age or ages and physically give myself a hug and say, I love you. You're important to me. Anything else you think they need to hear? I think that's really important. So that in a nutshell is what I call that part of being that divine parent, and especially emotionally to help that part of you to heal in terms of these past traumas that we've been talking about today. And if you don't want to call it a trauma, call it a wound or a negative experience. I know some people even have trouble calling something a trauma. Being teased at school. Oh, everyone was teased at school. That's not a trauma. You know what? It is. It is a trauma if we're being real about it. So any questions, Mark?
Now, there's, a lot to take in. And I know you said you've got some limited time here. Is this?
I can go a few more minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Is most of this addressed in your book? Connect with the Divine You? Is that part of your process?
It is. And I'm going to say, so that book was written in 2000 or published in 2018. And it's interesting. It is a foundation. It's what I call key number 1 now.
Okay.
But at that point, when I wrote that book, I had not yet called this being a divine parent or actually gone into that. That came, not that it's not connected, and definitely a piece of it, but I really got into this, what I call being the unconditionally divine loving parent, when I moved into late 2018, 2019, when I actually had deeper layers of trauma memories come back for myself. So I didn't know until 2018, 19 that I had been sexually abused by my father. Like I had repressed it because, of course, it's pretty terrible.
Right.
And through some other work I was doing, those memories came back. And then in 2021, I had the same thing happen with trauma with my mom, deeper traumas that I had repressed as well around physical abuse. So yeah, it's, I would say Connect with the Divine You is great. It's a foundation for the work that I do. And hopefully I've got my next book coming out soon, but which will go more into this work that I'm talking about today. But Connect with the Divine You is a great starting place for those that are interested in doing some of this deeper work. It's based on what I call the therapeutic meditation process. And yeah, Connect with the Divine You. So it's kind of the starting block or the foundation for really beginning to accept and connect with all parts of you. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for asking that.
What about trauma when we lose somebody, somebody, and not only just in our personal life, when, say, I know a big thing I see a lot is like a student in high school dies in an accident or just dies, whatever. And presumably the reports are that the whole student body is traumatized and they get a lot of counseling, a lot of guidance and things. Is that specifically trauma to an individual, or is
Oh, absolutely.
yeah.
I think, even if the person, I see this time and again, not just with like at school, but also if someone dies in the family, even though we weren't close to that person.
Mhm.
So of course it's a different experience if you're close with that person versus if you weren't, right?
Right.
But even if you weren't close with that person, what often happens is this trigger of, well, first of all, everyone's afraid of dying. I don't care how old you are, there's still that fear of death there. So I think it triggers that in us. So that fear of death, but I think it also can trigger younger parts of ourselves that we actually, like, we felt like we were going to die. So even though we didn't actually die, it's kind of hard to explain. I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but it's like someone else's death brings up that old trigger, that old wound where we felt like we might die. And so I think for that reason is why it's also can also be very traumatic and triggering. Whether it's, like you said, a classmate, or whether it's a family member, whether you were close to them or not. And then of course, if you were close to them, that's going to bring up a whole nother piece around abandonment, abandonment and loss. Yeah, that's a great question. But I would still use the same tools and processes to help that kind of trauma. Even though I might say things that are a little bit different, right? And so that's why we always ask, what is that limiting belief or fear that part of you took on? Because we always want to talk to that part of you, right? When we're doing the soothing, when we're doing the stepping in and being that divine parent to those parts of ourselves. And again, one of the biggest pieces is the emotional support, which is what you're talking about, right? If somebody loses somebody, receiving that emotional support.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's we had a question here about not only that, but when like myself, I lost my father when I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
And at the time, it didn't really seem traumatic to me. It was traumatic to my mother. I mean, and we all recognized that how traumatic it was, and how she was very good, just taking control of the situation, and she was in command of the family, and she did an excellent job, even though she didn't have all the tools you would think were required to do this job, but she really did a fantastic job, and we've always felt that way. But at the same time, there is a, sort of a sadness about, you know, things could have been otherwise for your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that case, yeah, I would still recommend you go work with that 6-year-old part of you.
Yeah.
That, I think whether it's 6 or 8 or 9, yeah, I have a lot of clients that have lost a loved one as a child. And again, we probably didn't get, even though our parents did the best they could, they were still dealing with their own loss, right? And a lot of our parents didn't have the tools that we have now and the awarenesses we have now. So you would still want to go work with that 6-year-old and go through, right, what I just took you through. Again, I don't expect people to do that on their own. It takes a lot of practice, which is why I have the audio recordings. So if you sign up at tanyapenny.com, you're going to get one of those. And so you could do that with your 6-year-old and support him to finally understand and grieve in a way he didn't get to do because he didn't have the tools and support to do so. And the awareness, right? And the awareness then, even though your mom did the best that she could, um, you know, I'm guessing there's still some sadness. And again, that's why I say this is a lifelong process. It's
Yeah.
not like we just do this once. Like I have done so much healing with my 6 to 10-year-old, and yet she still needs tending to more on certain days than others. So it's not something that, yeah, I was just talking to a new client this morning and she's like, so how long am I going to have to do this for? I'm like, this is a lifelong process. This is something you're going to do the rest of your life. You're going to show up for yourself every day in the shoes of being that divine parent, right? For yourself and all of your younger parts. And yeah, it's a lifelong learning, I would say, and practice and process of doing that. So yeah, great questions, Mark. Yeah, and I do, if anybody has any other questions, only because I do need to pop off. But if anybody has any other questions, you can feel free to. I know you're going to give contact information,
Right.
Mark. So Tanya at tanyapenny.com is my best email. And again, you can go get that that self-healing process audio and lots of other good stuff at tanyapenny.com. Signing up for my free gift. Yeah, would love to offer that to you guys. It's called the Evolve Starter Kit. So
Okay.
yeah.
Is Hawaii more forthcoming than Idaho?
In terms of what?
Uh, just in terms of the general environment, how you feel like every morning when you wake up, you say it's going to be another beautiful day.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, location is important for me and a lot of my clients.
Mhm.
And I grew up in Wisconsin and it was really cold and there was just lots of not great things weather-wise about it for me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, for me, part of the healing was taking all of my younger parts to a warm place, and they really love the water. So before this, I lived in California in the Bay Area. So we had water, but it was cold.
Yeah.
Like, could we go paddleboarding? Yes. Would I get in? Hell no.
Yeah.
Like way too cold. So yes, I will say for a lot of people, healing your trauma is going to require listening to what you really need in terms of a location. Did I ever think in a million years that I would live in Hawaii? No.
No.
The first time I came in 2004 with my now ex-husband, the minute I got to Hawaii, I said, I want to live here. And he said, never going to happen.
Yeah.
And, fast forward, never going to happen with him. But but it has happened. And I'm living here almost 2 years now with my my current wonderful partner, Sweetie. And yeah, I would say oftentimes part of the healing for a lot of people, including myself, is living in a place that gives you whatever nourishment you need. And for me, it's warm weather and warm water. Not that I don't like to go skiing, but I don't want to live there in a cold place because it reminds me of my childhood.
Yeah.
It's re-triggering for me if I had to live in a cold place again. So that's a great question, Mark. Thank you.
Okay, Tanya, we thank you so much for this information. It's been very entertaining, very informative. And we'll love to talk to you again in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you everybody who's listening live or to the replay. Namaste.
Okay. And everybody, we will have an additional program next week, next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. So thank you for joining.